Okay, clean glass, clean jigger. Let's get on with it. So the next one that was donated to me was actually donated a couple of days ago. I was in the centre of York, wandering around with work, as I am wont to do every now and again. Decided I'd take a swift diversion into my old haunt of the whisky shop in the centre of York. Now, if you're ever in the York area, I highly recommend going in. You'll find it next door to the Jorvik Viking Centre, so it's really easy to find. And the manager in there at the moment is a guy called Martin, who I've met a few times. Nice guy, knows what he's talking about. Whisky shop, chain of shops up and down the country. Great selection. Everybody that works there really knows what they're talking about. Really keen. I loved working there. It was a brilliant job. Made some cracking friends that have carried on throughout the industry, and I do miss it quite a lot. So I bobbed in there and I just said, look, have you got any tasting bottles that are open of cool products that you might be willing to send 25ml my way? Unfortunately he did. He had a couple of them. So many thanks, Martin. Thank you very much. Here's a picture of him now. While he was in the process of pouring the two samples out. So the first one I'll do, I might save the other one for later, but the first one was is attractively packaged in one of their 10cl bottles. So I'll put a picture of it now. It's Glen Founders Reserve. Now it's spelled Glen Garioch, but it's pronounced Glen. So next time you're in a shop and you see that and you don't want to make yourself look like an idiot in front of the staff member, then it's pronounced Glengarry. Now this is one of the oldest whisky distilleries in Scotland. This was founded by John and Alexander Manson in 1797. 1797? Yes, 1797. And it's also marketed as the most easterly distillery on mainland Scotland. So I shall put a map of where it is now, and you can see how far across it is now. It's one of these that's it's counted as part of the Speyside region, but on the bottle it calls itself a Highland distillery. In some places it's even calling itself an Eastern Highland. So it's loads of history on it, obviously being so old, but it's been closed a number of times as well, temporarily. It closed down during World War II, and some of the buildings in the distillery were actually used as dorms for the army. It then reopened, but then now I'm going to have to look at my list here because it got quite confusing. So it closed again in 1968. New owners took it over and it reopened in 1970. It then closed again in 1995, just after Suntory took it over. Now Suntory were the company that do Yamazaki that we tried the other day. I tried the other day. And they were buying a number of sort of distilleries and decided that it wasn't financially viable for them to basically continue operating it. However, a subsidiary of Suntory is a company called Morrison Bowmore, who, amongst other distilleries that they own, also own Bowmore Distillery in Islay. And they basically went to Suntory and said, look, we actually think there is a reason for reopening the distillery. We'd like to work with it. We'd like to carry on distilling. So it reopened in 97 after it closed in 1995. Now, a lot of this is exported for the Asian market, and it's also used in a number of blends as well. Now, this, even though you call it a Speyside, it used to experiment, particularly in the mid-70s, quite a lot with peating as well. The distillery manager had experience on Islay. I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me, but he'd had experience on Islay. Peated whiskey was quite popular at the time, and they were experimenting with peated whiskey. So it's a distillery that's not been afraid to experiment and try new things. So this particular one is a Founders Reserve, which is a no age statement. So it's a combination of different ages that they've used to try and kind of give a good balance of young whiskies for sort of spice and fieriness and a bit of intensity, and then older whiskies to balance it out and give it a bit more complexity. And they've released it at 48% as well, which is pretty high for a standard bottling as such. Normally a standard bottling tends to come at 40. You're looking at about 30 quid for this, sort of 31, 32 quid. It'd be very interesting to see what it's like, because it's not often you'll find Glengarry. They've only recently started coming into the market full on as a single malt. Nice. Now there's a weird. Now I've washed the glass out with clean water as opposed to dirty water, but I've washed the glass out, so I'm confident this isn't the glass that's bringing the smell. But there's almost a vegetal feel to it, kind of like a Pinot Noir vegetal kind of composty note to it right underneath. It's a little bit odd. It's almost like it's a kind of caramel sweetness that's slightly gone off. It's not unpleasant, but it's quite distracting. Or the dog's fired, one or the other, which is more than likely. So 48%, there is a prickle there. It's not too intense. It's quite heavy. It's quite rich. It's quite. I would argue it's heavily sherried in terms of the cask that they've used, because there's a definite rich mouthfeel to it. Right. Sorry about that, people. You were watching my video and no doubt enjoying my witty banter, and then it cut out, and I now have an empty glass because it turns out that I'd actually run out of space on the iPad and it just stopped recording, but didn't bother telling me or give me any warning or give me any heads up that I was running out of space. So cheers for that, Apple. Thanks very much. So yeah, I've got an empty glass. There is a little bit left, but I'm not going to bother. There's not 25 ml, so I'm not going to redo it again. But basically, it was the Glen 48%. Didn't need water added to it. Wasn't absolutely necessary. It had a little bit of a prickle at the back of the throat. It was it was spiky there. I would recommend somebody that's used to drinking 40% whiskey to maybe add a couple of drops, but any more than 1 or 2 drops, and it's gonna dilute too much the flavours that are in there. It's a very rich mouthfeel. It's very pleasant drinking. Not offensive in any way. No smokiness, no peatiness, nothing like that, even though historically it has been experimental with peatiness. But just a good, solid, dependable whiskey, and for 30 quid at that price, it's a decent value for money. So all in all, good stuff. It's just a shame that you couldn't enjoy some of the absolute cracking jokes that I was making for 5 minutes, speaking to apparently an empty void, you bastard thing. But yeah, it's drunk. We're counting that. I'm not having it as a discounted from the list because I've got too many to be getting on with anyway. So yeah, Glen, very pleasant indeed. Founders Reserve, even though there's 2 of them, so it should be the Founders Reserve. Yeah, very pleasant indeed. Apologies for the jump. I'm going to have to try and edit this together, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.